Yep.
Ready? Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Jonathan, and I'm here from San Francisco. It's fun to be in New York. It's very big. Feels like about 1,000 times as big as San Francisco. It's very hard to know where you are. So many buildings. So I'll refrain from making more commentary about the place that you all live, and let's talk about mobile automation. So. Yeah, this is me. I work for Sauce Labs on our ecosystem and integrations team, which is a really cool team. Our job is to make the open source ecosystem outside of Sauce Labs and mobile testing and browser testing really awesome, because we want all these tools to be really great so that people can use them for their own open source purposes, or to run their tests on Sauce Labs. I'm also here primarily, I guess, today representing Appium, the open source project. And I've been the project lead and the architect since we kind of started working on Appium. And we're going to talk today about kind of what's new with Appium. So I will give an introduction, so if you don't really know anything about it, you'll at least know something. The second half of the talk will focus more on what we've been up to the last 6 months or so, and I'll have a couple, video demos so you can see how things work. Yeah. So what is Appium exactly? It's a tool for automating your mobile applications primarily for the purpose of testing, and we aim to be cross-platform, by which we mean iOS and Android. Hopefully more platforms in the future, but for now, those two, which are the biggest anyway. And we want to support all kinds of apps, so native apps, mobile web apps, say if you just wanted to test your web application on a mobile browser, and also hybrid apps, kind of the mix between the two, where you've got your native layer around some kind of HTML5 application. Just out of curiosity, who works for a company with a mobile app that you want to test? Everyone in the back half of the room. Front half, they don't have mobile apps. Okay. Anyone doing specifically hybrid applications? Maybe? Cool, yeah. So, I mean, it's a pretty common thing that I've seen. A lot of companies want the rapid process of developing for the web, but the ability to deliver their apps to the native app stores and things like that. So anyway, with Appium, you can automate all these things on simulators / emulators, as well as on real devices. Another way of thinking about Appium is to think of it as the evolution of Selenium. So that's why I'm here at the Selenium meetup. It's the most natural place to talk about Appium, because Appium is essentially the same thing as Selenium. It uses the same protocol. It just automates a different kind of thing. It doesn't automate a desktop web browser. It automates mobile applications of the three kinds that I mentioned. And as I said, we just use the exact same protocol as Selenium. So if you have WebDriver code that you've already written, you could actually just use it to run tests on Appium directly without any modifications. So where have we come from in the year and 8 months that we've been working on this? Well, it all started because we really wanted to come up with the solution for mobile continuous integration. So you guys are probably familiar with continuous integration from working on web applications, where it's become very common for a lot of companies to have some kind of continuous integration or continuous delivery that involves running automated tests as part of it. So this is not very important to understand. It's just my diagram of what I think the best dev cycle is from the perspective of a developer or a company that wants to have a very rapid iteration. So the important piece is down here in this corner, where the continuous integration server runs a bunch of automated tests. This is how you know that the next thing you deploy isn't going to break or isn't going to be a bad experience for your users. And with the web, we've had the ability to run all kinds of tests on our continuous integration servers for a long time. We could run our unit tests. We could use Selenium to run a bunch of functional tests. But for mobile, that piece wasn't really there. And so it was a big problem because you want this really awesome development cycle, but if you have no way to run a bunch of automated tests, at the end of the day, you're still going to be blocked by doing a bunch of manual QA, and you won't have the rapid iteration that you want. So Appium came in as a way to try and solve this piece initially. And we wanted to solve it in some very specific ways. So when we were first kind of looking at the mobile automation landscape, trying to figure out, hey, is there already a project out there that does everything that we need? We kind of beforehand came up with these rules that we wanted to follow. And so we looked to see, is there any project out there that does all these things that we think are important? And it didn't seem like there was. So that's when we started to work in earnest on Appium. So, just briefly, the rules are that, firstly, you should be testing the same app that you're selling to your users. You shouldn't be building in a third-party library just for the purpose of testing your app, which is the way a lot of mobile automation projects work. They ask you to compile something into your app that gives their framework the ability to plug into those automation hooks and do stuff. We thought that this was a bad idea, because if you're building a third-party library into your application while you're testing it, who knows what other weird consequences it's having? Who knows whether your tests are, failing for the wrong reasons or passing for the wrong reasons, which is worse. So we thought it'd be better to just make sure that the app you're testing is the same thing that you're giving to your users. We also believed that it's a bad idea to lock people into writing their tests in one language or test framework. All of you guys here probably write your Selenium tests, for example, in a variety of different languages. There's probably 4 to 6 languages represented in this room. And if I were here trying to sell a mobile automation project, I would alienate 3/4 of you if I said that it's going to be in Python, or I'd alienate all of you probably if I said it was going to be in PHP. Does anyone write their Selenium scripts in PHP? Nice. Yeah. We actually have a PHP client for Appium too, because I grew up writing PHP, so couldn't leave that one out. But like I said, I'd probably alienate a lot of you guys if Appium was just written in PHP. So we thought that it's better for people to be able to choose how they want to architect their tests, how they want to write code as different teams and organizations. We also wanted to make sure that we weren't reinventing the wheel when it came to coming up with the model for automation that the user or the automator would have to get to know. So a lot of the projects that were out there before Appium, they each had their own way of conceiving of the process of automation. It was very, very different from the way that Selenium does it. But we felt that the way that Selenium does things is good, and in fact it's already become a sort of standard for web development. So why not reuse that same specification for mobile and not force all you guys to have to learn a totally new modality just to automate mobile apps? And my favorite is that we felt strongly that this should be an open source community effort. So I've been leading the project and I do work for Sauce Labs, but all the code that has been written is totally out there in the open. There's no license whatsoever attaching it to Sauce Labs. And we've attracted a large number of diverse contributors who have nothing to do with Sauce Labs and who are interested in Appium for its own sake. We actually have over 120 different contributors to the Appium project. So that's, I think, a sign that we're actually doing this as an open source community effort, not just doing the development behind closed doors and then putting the code out there for people to use if they want. But the decision processes involved in creating Appium also happen out in the open. So how do we do these things? The first rule we follow by essentially using the automation tools that have been provided by the vendors themselves. So Apple and Google already give you a way to automate your mobile apps. And that's really awesome. It's great that these companies wanted to give people a way to test their applications or automate them for other purposes. The trouble is that, you know, they're not very well thought through, they're different from one another, and they have all kinds of various limitations. But the best thing about them is that they allow you to automate your application without building something special into it. So you can just take the app that you've built that you would give to your user, and you can automate it without instrumenting it specifically for automation. So specifically what's under the hood is Apple's Instruments application that runs this sort of JavaScript API called UI Automation. So you can write little tests in JavaScript and put them into this Instruments app and run them. But it's kind of a pain the way they set it up. Likewise, Google has a couple different technologies that they've given to people for automating their apps, and we proxy to either of those depending on the kind of capabilities that you want. But what we do is we take all of these different technologies and we wrap them up behind a WebDriver interface. So all you have to do is write something that looks exactly the same as Selenium, and it has the effects that you want on a mobile device because we're leveraging these technologies under the hood. But you don't have to go and learn them yourself or understand how they work, and understand the different technologies for each platform. Instead, you just have to learn one thing, which is Appium, and then we take care of turning what you want into the appropriate thing for each of these underlying frameworks. So some of the main benefits of Appium, I've already kind of talked about these. If you have a lot of existing Selenium infrastructure in your company or a lot of experience on your teams, you can use 100% of that with Appium. You don't have to go and learn an entirely different thing. You don't have to go and rewrite your test harnesses, your test runners. You don't have to use a different language. It's also really nice because you can, if you have the kind of company where your dev and QA talk to each other, which is, if you don't have that kind of company, you should make it that way, quit or something. It's really easy to write cross-platform tests that you can actually have the same test that runs on both Android and iOS. And that's a really cool and powerful thing to see happen. And obviously one of the benefits is that it's free. You don't have to pay $10,000 for a license to use something that you can't even look at the code for. So yeah, there's a lot of great community members who are on the forums all the time responding to people's requests for help. I'm on there every day fixing things. So yeah, it's a really cool community. So since we started kind of publishing Appium, we've had over, so these are just a bunch of little stats where we're at right now. We've had over 60 different releases, almost 5,000 commits, which is over 8 a day, including weekends, which is pretty high velocity development, I think. We have received 1,700 issues on GitHub that we successfully closed, and have received almost as many pull requests from individuals that work either on kind of the core team or from random contributors that we've been able to merge into the code base. A lot of people like it on GitHub, and a lot of people seem to want to hack on Appium themselves, so they've forked the project and are looking at it that way. And as I said before, we have over 120 different contributors across all of the projects associated with Appium. So again, I think this is my favorite statistic because it just shows that there's an actual community of people who are working on this. We got an award last year for being an interesting open source project, 1 of 10, I think, which is surprising to me because who really cares about mobile automation? I thought it was just this random niche thing that a few people did because they were a little weird, but apparently it's an interesting enough project that we got this award for it. So yeah, so if you haven't seen Appium in action before, here's just a couple videos to show how you can use Appium to automate the kinds of applications that I was talking about at the beginning. This demo is interesting because it's kind of emphasizing the ability to write cross-platform tests. So up in the top left, this is a test script. I'm just showing the code in a web browser, and it's highlighting each step as it's executing it. So this is just an Appium script. This is written in Python, I think. And it is automating this photo viewing application on an Android emulator here. And it's, it's going through the flow. The code is probably too small for you guys to see, but there's sort of a little page object model thing going on, where we're clicking back or we're scrolling up to find certain text that we want to click on, and now we're looking for our email settings here and verifying that they're there, and ending the session. So now what's happening is we're running the exact same code, but we've changed the desired capabilities to specify that we want to run on iPhone instead of Android, and so it's actually just executing all the same steps, but on iPhone this time. So you can see it's a pretty magical thing that you can write one test and have it work well on both platforms. We can all look at pictures of my trip to Guatemala 10 years ago if we want. I think this is a beautiful app. The company that Matthew works for developed it. Check it out. Anyway, you guys get the idea, so I'll move forward. Here's another test that's running on an Android device, except this time it's not an emulator, it's an actual device. It's a Nexus 7 tablet, and I'm just automating the contacts application that comes with the Android operating system. So you can see, we can enter text into fields, we can hit buttons and work with the various UI elements to go through a flow of adding and deleting a contact. So this is just to illustrate that Appium works well on real devices as well as emulators and simulators. And this little demo is illustrating Appium's mobile web support. So running essentially a regular Selenium test on a mobile browser like mobile Safari or Chrome. So this was just a very short test that asserted that something showed up in a text field, and we're running the exact same test on the different platforms, again, just by changing the desired capability, as you're familiar with doing in Selenium to request a different browser. So yeah, it's pretty cool that you can actually use Appium kind of just as a drop-in replacement for Selenium when it comes to mobile browsers. And this is kind of fun because this isn't a real iPhone, obviously, but there's this robot that Jason Huggins made that will use Appium, but kind of catch all the click and tap events, and instead of having Appium execute them on the device, it sends it to this robot, and the robot actually will execute them. So it's like sending a tweet right now, something like that. So. I don't know, it's kind of fun. It may not be super useful right now, but Jason is really into it, and I think we'll probably figure out a way to turn it into something useful very soon. So that's kind of where we've come and what it feels like and looks like to run Appium tests. So where are we now? Like what have we done recently that's worth talking about? The most recent version is 1.2.1, so we kind of crossed the 1.0 milestone back in May when we felt that the APIs had grown stable and the server itself was relatively stable, and now we just are working on our 1.x milestones. What would I say that we've kind of accomplished in before 1.0 and as we cross that boundary line? Well, as I said, we made the server a lot more stable so that it hardly ever crashes, that I've noticed. We've implemented new client libraries. So as much as we would have liked to just stick with the regular Selenium clients, there are just certain things that you want to be able to do on a mobile device that will never become part of the Selenium specification, like shaking the device, for example. You're never going to shake a web browser, but you're going to shake your phone, or you might rotate it, or set the geolocation, or perform a complex swipe gesture, things like that. So we had to extend the protocol, and we've been doing this in concert with the Selenium project to make sure that everything looks good. but we have created client libraries which are simple extensions of the Selenium libraries themselves. So you could also use them to automate, your browsers if you wanted. But what they do is they give you access to these extra commands like shake or locking the screen or things like that. So we put some work into those to make sure that your experience of running Appium tests is as good as your experience of running Selenium for the regular desktop web. We've implemented a new desired capability structure, which is in fact what Selenium itself is going to adopt with Selenium 3 that's supposedly coming out in December. And we worked with the Selenium project to come up with this new capability structure that makes a lot more sense when you factor in all the various kinds of devices and browsers and operating system combinations that you can have with mobile. If you used Appium a long time ago, you used XPath, then you used the XPath parser that I wrote in like an hour, and it wasn't very good. So we finally were able to replace that with an XPath parser that allows you to perform all the kinds of XPath queries, complex filtering that you might be used to with Selenium. However, I don't recommend using XPath searches. They're bad. So if you want to know more about that, come talk to me later. We've added Android hybrid support. So if you have one of these hybrid apps, with the advent of Android 4.4, we can now automate both the native and the WebView portions of those applications. And we added Android mobile web support for the browser application that comes with Android emulators. We always had support for Chrome, the real browser, especially on real devices, but you can now automate the little stock browser that comes with your Android emulator too, if you've ever played around with that. We've given you the ability to use full Unicode for typing into Android text fields, so you can type in your kanji or your Thai characters or whatever it is that you want to type in, and it's pretty cool to see that happen as well. We have some new locator strategies, which I'll talk about in a minute. We have this new touch action and multi-action gesture API, so that you can perform the kind of complex gestures that are common with mobile applications that weren't so common with desktop applications. So you can do things like this. This is Appium actually using the gesture API on a drawing application, and it's trying to draw its own logo. So there are three essentially fingers operating at once. So I'll do it again. So it's this is just one gesture command with three fingers going through different points, and then again three fingers going through different points to try and create the Appium logo. So it's possible to automate the kind of complex gestures that you might be using in your application. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Hotel Tonight app. Probably some of you guys. They released a blog not too long ago, which was really fun to see. They use Appium to automate Hotel Tonight, and at one point in the flow of reserving a hotel room, you have to kind of follow this complex gesture with your finger in order to confirm that you want to spend the money, and they were actually able to automate that with Appium, and that had been a challenge for them in other frameworks. So I just think it's a fun thing to see. If you're a Windows user, we've added better support for running your Appium Android tests on your Windows machine. It always kind of worked, but we made sure that it actually worked. There are still a lot of problems with the graphical user interface for Windows, but the server itself works quite well. A lot of people are automating Android on Windows with Appium these days. We do have new versions of the Appium GUIs, one for Mac and one for Windows. Yeah, you should just check them out. And thanks to Matthew and a number of other contributors, we have really great new docs. They look great. There's a lot more content there, really useful for getting set up and for answering questions about what kind of desired capabilities you can use, what kind of arguments you can pass to the server, and so on. So now I'll just kind of go through some specific examples to show how Appium has changed with some of these new features. And the languages I'm using, I guess this is Ruby. Is this Ruby? Yeah, looks like Ruby. It's kind of like Python too, but not quotes. Okay, so here's like the new desired capability structure that I was talking about. We used to have things like device and version, but now we have platform name, platform version, and device name to kind of honor the reality that we have mobile operating systems and mobile devices, and they're distinct. And an iPhone isn't just an iPhone. There's iOS, and you have like an iPhone 5S, and they're different things, and they can be combined in various ways. We're also bringing back the browser name capability, which makes a lot of sense. If you want to automate Safari on an iOS device, then Safari is a browser, and we should be able to use the browser name capability to denote that. So you can look at our docs for more details if you're in the process of transitioning to a new version of Appium, but essentially we got rid of those capabilities on the left, which were leading to a lot of confusion, and we now have the kind of more robust set of capabilities which help us to specify exactly what we're interested in on the right. This is just an example of one of the Appium client libraries. This is the Ruby library that Matthew maintains, and you'll see that here where we're kind of invoking the session, we're calling the new method on the Appium driver instead of a Selenium remote WebDriver. And this is just an example of how we're getting access to the special mobile commands that Appium provides. Here are some of the new locator strategies that I was talking about. We have an accessibility ID strategy, so that you can find an element by its accessibility ID on either platform. And other ones that if you're interested in, we can talk more about XPath as well if you want to perform some kind of complex filter-based query. This is actually not that new. I guess what's new here are the locator strategies. So we could find an element now by its class name in the actual platform that we're talking about. So on iOS, buttons are called UI buttons, and in the automation land, they're called UIA buttons. So we can find an element like that, kind of equivalent to finding an element by its tag name in HTML in Selenium. Or for Android, this would be android.widget.button, because that's how they name their classes. We have a new context API for switching into and out of web views. So if you have a hybrid application, you need some way to tell Appium that you want to automate the native layer or the web layer. And so we use this context API to signal to Appium, hey, I want to automate the web view portion now. And from that point on, you essentially have a Selenium server at your disposal. You can send all the regular Selenium commands that you're familiar with, and then you can go back out to the native layer and find your native buttons and things. Here's an example of how you can use the new touch action API to build up a swipe with a very small number of arguments. So this command here will perform a swipe that goes, scrolling a view down by kind of swiping your thumb up the middle of the screen in the duration of 1 second. So it's a very powerful API for basically doing exactly what you want with gestures. So yeah, I'm also here representing Sauce Labs. So I wanted to point out that while Appium can be really great when you want to run sort of a limited number of tests in your local environment, if it's just you and your laptop, at some point you're going to run into the issue of trying to scale up your test suite. If you're going to try and run 100 tests on your own machine, it's going to take quite a long time. And so you have the option of building out your own kind of farm of VMs and making sure that all the Appium servers are set up and provisioned correctly, and using Selenium Grid to kind of orchestrate all the different sessions, and that's totally possible. But the reason that Sauce Labs exists as a company is that that's also a big headache, and why would we want to maintain a farm of VMs when we don't have to? We could focus on just writing our tests. So we do give you a nice interface to kind of look at your test results. You essentially just run your Appium scripts, and they talk to our cloud instead of your own local Appium server. The VMs with the simulators and emulators are in our cloud, and we're coming out with real devices soon as well. So you can see screenshots and videos of how your test runs are going. You can even watch them going on in real time, which is pretty awesome. And you also get a log of all the various commands that were sent. So this is just the same as for running Selenium tests on sauce. You can see the commands that your script sent, the response, whether it was a successful response or not. And you can, as I said, watch the video or screenshot. And we're going to be very soon releasing a cloud of Android real devices. So if you want to actually run your tests on real devices, real hardware, to make sure that they pass, on the exact same device that your customer, your user is going to be using, then this will be very interesting. We're in a kind of private beta right now, but this will be coming out very soon. So yeah, just a few things that are going to be coming up with the project that we have our eye on. The biggest one for me right now is iOS 8 support. Apple has been releasing a series of developer previews, and I've been looking at all of those. Unfortunately, they're all broken in different ways, and I've been reporting the bugs, and they've been fixing them, but I'm optimistic that we're getting close to something that's going to work. So that's a big one. There are also betas of the next Android operating system, and they're kind of the wearable version of their operating system that we want to make sure work well with Appium. And there's a lot of really cool things you can do with, for example, ADB, if you're an Android developer, that give you a lot of power over the device, and we want to expose that to the people who are using Appium so that you can automate all features of the device and not just those that have been made available through Google's automation mechanism. So if you're an Android tester, stay tuned, there's going to be some fun things coming out. We're also getting into the habit of keeping our plans on the milestones at GitHub. So if you're ever wanting to know, where can I keep track of a feature that I requested, well, make sure that it gets added to one of these milestones so that you'll know it's in the kind of the plan to be worked on. And if you see a feature there that you want to be worked on that someone else has requested, make sure to go and add your 2 cents for why you think it would be a good feature to have, or why you want us to fix this bug and not another bug, because the more feedback we get from the community, the more we're able to prioritize which things to work on first. So yeah, that's Appium, where we've come from, where we're going, and yeah, if you guys have any questions.
I have a question about managing your locators across different devices. So the iOS development teams and the Android development teams that I've worked with haven't collaborated in the companies I worked with. So how do you deal with that in your test? Do you have different equivalent page locators for different devices, or do you work with the developers to ask them for consistent IDs, or how do you solve that problem?
Yeah, the best thing is to work with the developers. Ideally it would be part of maybe even the spec that they receive.
Yeah.
Like, assuming that they're just independent teams, like the iOS team and the Android team, they both receive, some kind of set of requirements. It would be nice if those requirements specified, like, here's the accessibility ID you'll use for this button, to make sure that it's the same on both platforms. If that doesn't happen, then you could just talk to them and ask for that. And if that doesn't happen, then what I've done in some apps that didn't implement that I was trying to automate, is essentially the same thing as a page object model, but you have one for each kind of device, and you just encapsulate the differences in locators there, whereas your test stays the same for both of them because you're calling the methods on the object model, not the locators directly in the test. So it still keeps it kind of clean. By the end of the day, you won't be able to get around having kind of a different library of selectors for both.
Thanks.
Yeah, in the back.
With Appium, can you go across applications? So if that's multiple applications, does it let you do that?
So the answer for iOS is no. It's a limitation that Apple has imposed. As soon as you leave the app that you're currently automating, the automation just shuts down on you. So yeah, that's a big pain. Fortunately, the situation with Android is better. So if you're using our kind of UI Automator-based support in Android, you can automate any application on the device, whether you own it or not. You can go back and forth. Basically anything that a user can do you can also do. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for having me back. I was here like a year and a half ago, and it was awesome. Good to see you guys again.
Thank you very
Different
much.
place, yeah.
Is this recorded? It's available for download
I don't know.
to show others?
Are you recording?
Can you replay that?
Yes,
Voice
recording.
command is possible. I don't know.